Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. If there's more funneling in throughout, we'll just keep filling the seats. I'm Will Lyons. As many of you may know, I'm the Armed Forces Alumni Association president here at NCR, and it's my privilege to introduce our speaker today and run through just a quick few announcements to let everybody know some of the things we have going on. So as some of you may not know, the Armed Forces Alumni Association is our Veterans Business Resource Group here at NCR. So our mission is to create a sense of community with our members to help us grow and mentor each other. And we do that through events like the one we have today on post-traumatic growth and resilience. We also strive to hire and retain more military talent to NCR, and then we strive to give back to our community as well. So you may have seen, if you work at GHQ, some bins near the entrances of the North, South, and main lobby. Those are for Toys for Tots. That's a Marine Corps Reserve program that our organization is sponsoring here at NCR to help give underprivileged children new unopened toys during the holidays. So if you want to participate in that and you're local here, please bring in a toy or 2 or 10 and drop it in one of those bins. We would appreciate it. I know the children would appreciate it, and we'd love for that. And there are some ways, if you're not local here at GHQ, to donate as well, and we'll get some communications out about that later on this week so that everybody can have the chance to participate. We encourage everybody, if you're not a member of the BRG, to join. You don't have to have served in the military. We appreciate friends, family, supporters, anybody that wants to join, and more specifically, or more important, you don't have to have served or be in the United States. We are a global company, so we are an organization that represents a global veteran and military community as well. So please jump on Bridge, go to communities, find Armed Forces Alumni Association, and join. You can click subscribe, that gets you on our distribution list, and you'll know about more events coming up like this. So I'm extremely excited about this today for 2 reasons. Number one, this is our first major event that we've done as a BRG, and we're excited to let everybody know what we're about and what we're doing, and to provide this talk so that we can all learn and grow from it. But secondly is the timing that we chose for this event. Tomorrow is Veterans Day, Armistice Day, or Remembrance Day, depending on where you are in the world, and that signifies the end of World War I way back in 1918. But specifically here in the United States, we have turned that into more of a robust holiday to honor veterans and service members and people who have served their countries. So I encourage you just to take a moment today or tomorrow and be mindful of that. Thank somebody if you would like, and just remember the purpose for that. So this is how we're honoring that day as a group. A couple key people I want to thank real quick to make this happen and get us where we are today. John Morrow, first of all, our executive sponsor, for not only taking on that mantle and helping us become official, but also for being the first person that raised their hand when I asked and helped me get this started to begin with. So I appreciate that and all the effort you do. The rest of the board, I appreciate the work you guys do. Yeah, let's give a round of applause. The AFAA board, I appreciate the efforts you guys do. We don't get paid for this, so it's always appreciated. And for everybody who's here and Bell Studios for this great place. So enough of me. I'm proud to introduce Greg Hebert. Greg served in the U.S. Army as an officer. He was a unit commander at the 82nd Airborne Division, which some would argue is the best division in the Army. He went to West Point not Naval Academy. You got me messed up. At West Point Military Academy, which, as most people in the United States will know, is one of the premier military academies that we have, not to start a rivalry with the Naval Academy here. And then went on to a number of other units, was asked to go back to West Point to instruct and teach on leadership, achieved accolades there, furthered his education at Harvard Business School, and then went on to a number of consulting firms, McKinsey included, before starting his own firm, Leadership Forward, where he travels all over the world and consults with leaders. So I'm really excited to learn about methods and tools that we can use to help with post-traumatic growth and how to be more resilient. So without any further ado, I'll introduce Greg. Thank you, sir. All the way.
Thank you. All the way. Yeah. I'm very, very honored that Will would introduce me. We We served in the 82nd Airborne Division at different times, but instantly when I found out that he too was a paratrooper, we felt a deep sense of kinship. I'm just overjoyed to be here to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart. But I'm glad that Will reminded us tomorrow's a great day. So I just want to take an opportunity also to remember, and wonderful movie, Battle of Hacksaw Ridge, but the story is extraordinary. Desmond Doss, Lynchburg, Virginia, Seventh-day Adventist, refused to carry a weapon, and yet on the Battle of Okinawa, on this ridge, he went back dozens of times to pull soldiers on his back down, and he's credited with saving over 75 lives on that day. And what I love is when he was interviewed and talked about, he says, I know I couldn't live with myself if I didn't stay true to what I believe. So deeply, deeply clear about his first principles, which I think is an important element of leadership. But his mantra every time he went up is, please, Lord, let me get more. Just amazing. So he died in 2006. He lived a long time despite being 100% disabled. So I honor his memory. And I told Austin and John that my father was a Green Beret officer, served in Vietnam, several tours, and he had 6 children, and all 6 went into the military. And when my one brother, a full colonel, took off his uniform, my family had given 117 years of active duty service. So I feel like there's a deep, vast legacy in my family that I'm very, very proud of. Our goal today is I want to provide illuminated insights, something you can do with, around happiness, fulfillment, well-being in the midst of tremendous difficulty, adversity, and challenges. I have turned to Stoicism as a key area to study, because the Stoics believe that since all of us don't get out of life without being taxed and dying, that there is something inherent with life about suffering. The people you love, either you'll leave them or they will leave you. Hurricanes come, stock markets crash. The nature of life is going to throw you curves and difficulty. And the Stoics believe that life is an opportunity for virtue. And the only way that virtue can grow in all of us is to be tested and challenged. So this one physician leader I was coaching today, we sort of commiserated on some of his challenges. And I said, my gosh, these 2 characters who you're having to corral, they're your greatest teachers, aren't they? So I often say that the most difficult people in our lives are indeed the opportunities for our greatest teaching. I want to provide you with a deeper understanding of the key practices of organizations, individuals that provide and promote this concept called post-traumatic growth and individual transformation. And third, really, I hope you leave with some clear sets of actions, commitments that you're going to do something to have the most meaningful, wonderful life that's possible. I think leadership really matters, especially in times of difficulty. And one of my heroes is this guy, Winston Churchill. An incredible book that really inspired me at the beginning of COVID was The Splendid and the Vile by Eric Larson. And he chronicles when Winston Churchill got the mantle of leadership in May of 1940, and only sort of covered him over the next year, May of 1941. That 1 year, and what's amazing about that 1 year is Great Britain did not experience a single victory. They had to rescue 133,000 soldiers off the shores and sands of Dunkirk. 110,000 soldiers surrendered in Singapore to the Japanese. They lost a decisive land battle up in Norway to the Germans. Rommel was doing his thing to the 8th Army, Britain in North Africa. There was a ship battle off the coast of Spain. Everywhere that the people of Great Britain looked, there was defeat. And yet, this man inspired people to believe that they would persist. They would be okay. And as this quote says, never, 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 never give in. And the resoluteness of Winston Churchill was extraordinary. And he gave people hope and a sense of optimism, and that we will prevail no matter what. And so there was research, especially on the day that Winston Churchill took over. Germany declared war and mounted a bombing campaign called the Battle of Britain. And every day England was bombed, and London sustained 57 straight days of bombing. And all of the behavioral scientists and psychologists predicted that there'd be massive, massive trauma dysfunctional trauma, post-traumatic trauma, especially in the young people. Could you imagine what it was like? You'd hear these sirens go off as the day turned into night. You'd go deep into these caverns, off in subway stations. You'd sleep on a hard, cold ground, oftentimes amongst people you'd never met before, and you didn't get to go up until the all clear, and then when you went up, you'd found out whether your home had survived the bombing. Well, what's amazing is the behavioral scientists were all wrong, that the people of Great Britain, it turned out, did just fine. From a psychological point of view, there was a deep sense of resoluteness and optimism and hope. And so I often love these two pictures. This one character is carrying milk, and my sense is this guy did okay. Why? Because he's got important work, and he's got people to serve, and they need milk, so he's doing something purposeful and meaningful. And I think he feels pretty proud in his little sharp white outfit, and the woman there is serving tea and biscuits to the troops, and she too has a sense of meaning and purpose. And there was this mantra, stay calm and carry on. Will told me a little story about parachuting with the Canadians, right? and the Canadians, to steel up their courage before they jumped out the door, would do chanting. And Great Britain across the land had their own chant, stay calm, carry on, we will prevail. Stay calm, carry on, we will prevail. And there's tremendous research that says these mantras actually do help us. They ground us, they center us, and allow us to access the most brilliant part of human beings, which is our prefrontal cortex, which doesn't work really well when you're frightened and scared and anxious and stressed and fatigued. So we're going to talk more about that later. I have a couple perspectives. You got to know where I'm coming from. And one of them that I think about often is the storms of life. We can't wait for them to blow over. I think one of the greatest things we can learn is how do we dance and work as capably, as thoughtfully, as meaningfully in the midst of the storm. And one of the profound things that comes out of the Jewish scriptures, the Talmud says, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. And one of the quickest ways to change the world is change how you see it. Right? I try to think of that, if not daily, at least weekly. And then the next quote I'm going to share with you is deeply meaningful for me. I'm running 6 workshops next week for hospital supervisors who are sort of battling each other because there's not enough staff, there's not enough beds, there's too many patients, and there's this friction around the ICU and the ED and the med surge, and I'm trying to give them some tools to slow things down, to take a pause, and one of the things I'm trying to help them is to see the space between something happening to you and your response to that. And so probably one of the most magnificent books ever written is Man's Search for Meaning by a guy named Viktor Frankl. And Viktor Frankl was a Freudian psychiatrist in Vienna, had a chance to leave when things were going south with the Germans, but his parents were elderly, he had family, and he was committed to helping them. And so he eventually ended up in Auschwitz, and all of his family died in the Holocaust except him. And he came back to Vienna, a broken man, and yet wrote this amazing book in 9 days, Man's Search for Meaning, that talks about how people, even in the midst of despair and even in the midst of tragedy like Auschwitz, can take their piece of bread and break it in half and give it to another prisoner as a gesture of kindness. And so he said these incredible words, that between stimulus and response lies a space, and in that space lies the freedom to choose our response. And in our freedom to choose our response lies our power, right? Like when I teach leadership, I probably think about this and provide it every group I ever meet with, because I think it is so deeply profound. It is simple, but hard, right? To recognize the stimulus and to see the space, and then to fill in the space with more thoughtfulness, with more choice around what's the best for my family, what's the best for NCR, what's the best for my team, and then ultimately say, maybe what's best for me. As opposed to when we get triggered, especially when we don't go into our mindfulness, we tend to go, what's in it for me? Even before COVID, we as a society, American society, we're not doing well from a mental and physical well-being. I just read a report the other day that says Americans on average have gained 30 pounds per person since 1963. So in the time since that, if you look at obesity rates across this country, despite all of the breakthroughs in medical technology, there still is yet a super pill that can make us thin. And so the growth rate of obesity is probably outpacing everything to include inflation. And here are some of the statistics that I think are meaningful. Depression rates, 12 times higher than they were in 1960. That was 2019 data. Average age of depression 2019 was 14 and a half. It was almost 30 in 1960. Close to 48,000 suicides in 2019, and then estimated to be over 1.5 million attempts. And that's estimated. People are shameful of actually reporting that they tried to take their lives. And it's only gotten worse as the pandemic has woven on. I find this next statistic amazing. In 1940, when the winds of war were already in place in the Pacific and Europe, and Americans reported their lives as being very satisfied. And I don't know what this, I have to find, Google will tell me if I look, how many American homes had actually electricity and plumbing? I remember when I was a kid at West Point, I was in the Glee Club, and we visited this little town in Paris, Tennessee. And the year before, this farm that I stayed at had just gotten plumbing, indoor plumbing. And they were so proud. Like I was the show and tell at one of these, first grade to eighth grade schools. And I came in my uniform, and this little 7-year-old said, "This is my cadet." So, in 1940, how many people didn't even have indoor plumbing? And yet their lives were very satisfied. Compared with 2019, the number had dropped well below 60%, and I have no idea what it is today, but I know it's not higher. And then even our best and brightest that have the privilege and opportunity to go off to college. I have 2 friends that are psychologists who are counselors on Clemson and Georgia. And the number of, there's just too many students seeking their help and not enough help to provide, right? And I think in 2018, this study said 39% suffered from severe depression. So something is going on. It's in our water. It's in our environment that says we're not a very healthy mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually people. I want to talk about my own story, right? And my own story, and my lovely daughter Katie is out in the lobby. I am pushing my books, and she's out there. But a lot of my story was when I was the age of 6. My father was a Green Beret officer, high expectations, and I remember my mother and him fighting, usually alcohol involved, and my mother pointing to me, yelling at my father, he was a mistake. I don't know if that's true, but I must have carried that. I went to a Japanese Catholic school, and my first grade teacher, if you can believe it or not, was a pedophile and abused first graders. And I didn't really connect with that until my best friend, when I was going to high school, had been in that same school a year before me, and he started talking about what happened to him. And I went, well, the same thing happened to me. All right, and then I had a problem. It turned out to be a urological problem, a health problem, but I had a hard time controlling myself, and my father thought it was a behavioral issue. So at the age of 6, he'd put diapers on me and have me parade around the house as my punishment. So again, I'm not sitting here, looking to you for therapy. I've gone through my own. But one of the things I drew from those experiences was I was not enough. I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't good enough, I was not enough. And that was most of my story, right? Until a dear, dear friend said, "You need real help. And my wife said, "You do." And I went off to this pastor at a church, and he says, "You need professional help." And he got me to this 82-year-old by the name of Kempton Haynes, and I met him not far from here at the First Presbyterian Church of Atlanta on the annex in the 6th floor. He had these big floppy chairs, and he wore blue jean overalls and a white t-shirt and had a big, big white beard. He looked like Santa Claus if he were from the South Pole. And he'd just look at me and smile. And I don't know about you, but I'm not really good with silence. So I said, "I guess I'm supposed to talk, right?" He'd just smile at me. And I guess I'm supposed to talk about me, right? Just keep smiling. But the fourth session, he finally opened up and said, I'd hate to be your wife. Like, Kempton, why? What? He says, because it's clear that you make everybody else outside of you responsible for your happiness, and she's probably carrying the greatest load. And I went running home to her that night, and I said, Claudia, do you think you're responsible for my happiness? Could just see this big sigh. It's like a big weight lifted. Yeah. And with 4 kids, 3 about to go into high school, a toddler, like, you're my 5th kid, and it's getting tiring. And that the transformation didn't occur instantly, but it began to happen as I realized, Greg, you are responsible for your happiness. You are responsible for the good things in your life. Manifest it. And one of the first things I had to take on was this notion of I wasn't enough. Like, I graduated in the top 2% of my class at West Point. I am enough. Graduated in the top of my class at Harvard Business School. I am enough, right? And I'm a relatively good man. Tries to live a principled life. I am enough, and you're enough. But there's a lot of people walking around in our society believing they're not enough. Right? So anyway, you see the first picture of me sort of, you listen to a lot of my self-talk, even my prayers to God is, God, help me be a better man. And now my prayer is, God, you've given me everything I need and everything I ever wanted to be a great man. So let me pray for other people in the world. And so the picture you see on your left is, I went to my granddaughter Estelle's classroom, and there I'm performing for 70 pre-K kids. Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. And I didn't know it, but my granddaughter came up and decided I needed a demonstration. And then that led me really to write this book in 2018 called You Can't Give What You Don't Have. And I deeply believe in that if you want love in your life, if you want energy, you want everything, you've got to manifest it, right? And so I'm going to talk about the strategies and approaches that each of us can do to deepen the sense of having everything you need. One of the wisest men that I've ever known, he never got past the 5th grade, but I got to do prison ministry with him, John Bonviaggio. He said these beautiful words that what you keep, you lose, because inevitably there's no U-Hauls behind the hearses. But what you give away is yours forever. So I think about that quite a lot. I've been blessed. Leadership Forward has had tremendous success, my company, since founding in 2001. But at the beginning of COVID, a lot of my clients are healthcare, and many of them called me up to say, Greg, don't come. We're fighting COVID, and it's really bad, and don't know when we're going to need your services. And I went into what I would call the fear zone. There are still food in my basement, Twinkies and pinto beans and oatmeal and really lousy toilet paper, because I got into a place of fear. And I thought, my whole business model that I'd carefully worked and savored was going to come to an end. I probably transmitted more anger because deep inside my stomach was all of this anxiety about what was going to happen to me, what was going to happen to my family, what was going to happen to my world, what was going to happen to the world. And about 2.5, 3 weeks, I go, Greg, you're better than this. Like, you have been resourced in going to great schools and having tremendous pastors and coaches and so many things that have blessed my life. You know better. So I found myself journeying into this, what I call the learning zone, right? I make myself more aware of my situation and what was the best way to respond. I became a Zoom master. When I had my Harvard Business School reunion in virtual, I was my class Zoom master. I am not a technologist, but I realized I better get smart on that, and just give people grace. And you don't know what people are going through, and realize that I'm not alone, and to deepen my relationships. I just spent last week out in Montana with 3 couples that you'll get to meet because they're my best friends. And I've had a Zoom call every 2 weeks with those 3 other couples, my wife and I. And that came out of this notion of, like, to move out of fear into learning, I needed to broaden my social network. And then the more that I found myself walking and journeying into this learning zone, I found myself moving into this contribution zone. This talk you're hearing me give, I I probably gave it 200 times, gave it away to health systems that were struggling with. And if they said, hey, I got 5 nurses here in New Orleans that could benefit, hey, I'm here for you. And so I found ways to adapt to change and difficulty. I started practicing more calm and patience and creativity. And again, I'm not Gandhi. I'm Greg with this with all of the flaws and shortcomings, but the tools I offer you today are open and available to all of us. And if there's one thing that I would say to you is C.S. Lewis, this wonderful, wonderful, gifted writer, said that we need less to be instructed and more to be reminded. So the probability that I share anything with you that you haven't heard before is probably pretty low. But what I want to challenge you is, what are you doing to make it a part of your life? And so when I was 19 at West Point, they had a program, an exchange program that's going on to this day, and I signed up to go to the Naval Academy, into the enemy's den. And 1979 was an extraordinary year because the superintendent, his operations officer, my battalion tactical officer, all had been former POWs. And a guy named Jeremiah Denton wrote a book, When Hell Was in Session. He would often journey onto the campus, as well as Medal of Honor winner Admiral Stockdale would frequently come and visit and teach classes on ethics and English. And so there was this prevailing openness about what these men had shared. And what I was struck by at the age of 19 is the enlightenment of these guys is extraordinary. And I said to myself even then, like, do I have to get tortured, shot down, abused, malnourished, and my freedom taken away for 5 years to experience this enlightenment? I hope to heck not. There must be a better way. Or not a better way, but a less painful way. And what's amazing is the Navy continues to study a lot of these men that came back. 591 were released out of captivity in 1973. Almost all of them were tortured, abused, malnourished. Many of them, for the first couple of years, their families didn't even know if they were alive or dead. Of these, 138 naval aviators were the subjects of a study that continues. And what's amazing is, of these 138, and they believe it's applicable to the 591, only 4% of them suffered prolonged stress, post-traumatic stress disorder. 4%. There's a higher likelihood, I hope you're not from Cleveland, but me going onto the streets of Cleveland and pulling someone off the streets, there's a higher probability that they've got PTSD from, all of the years of their poor sports team's performance. So these guys offer us this window, like, is incredible. Like, what happened, right? And I love this picture. My battalion tactical officer was a guy named Paul Galante, just an extraordinary human being. And he and his family were pictured on Newsweek. Not this picture, but a similar one where you see the family and just reaching out to their loved one. And so I love this picture because what's amazing, this woman, Linda Henman, lives in St. Louis, wrote her dissertation on the communication practices of the POWs while in captivity. And in her opening chapter of an amazing dissertation, she says, that these men, for every story of sadness, there's tons of joy and celebration, because these men came back not broken, but they came back whole, healthy, determined to make life magnificent. And there's a dear friend of mine by the name of Lee Ellis who lives in Cumming. He's on his 7th book. In his 7th book, he allowed me to review it a couple months ago, called Captured by Love. 20 stories of POWs who came back and either rekindled their love with spouses who stood by and waited, or in Lee's case, he was single when he was shot down and came back and found love. And I hope this book does really well, because he allowed me to read it, and it's just enchanting. So these POWs pointed me to was this notion that not everybody gets broken by hard things in life. And whether it's Viktor Frankl or these 591 POWs or parents who have lost children, these 2 researchers in UNC, Tedeschi and Calhoun, in 1985 came up with this term, post-traumatic growth. And it turns out, to the people who are able to transform their lives in extraordinary ways, turns out there's some common outcomes of characteristics that sort of say, oh, they got it. And those 5 characteristics, the first being like a deepened sense of purpose and meaning. Mothers Against Drunk Driving came about of a couple mothers who had just had the trauma of losing teenagers to drunk drivers. And they said, in order to honor the loss, honor my children who got taken from me, and that should never happen to a parent. And you never get over that. But these women said, we got to make something good from this. The second is this notion of when you've had a relationship ripped apart from you. Like people with post-traumatic growth have a deepened sense of compassion and empathy. Like relationships matter more than just about anything. And third, this deepened sense of resilience says if I can go through that, there's nothing I can't go through in the future. So deepened resilience. 4 is not only a renewed sense of meaning and purpose, but like I'm going to spend my life not sweating the small stuff. I'm not going to let the little stuff get in the way of living a life with purpose and meaning and deepening my relationship. So don't sweat the small stuff. Greater appreciation for life in general. And 5th, you can't come through one of these experiences and come out whole unless something happened to your belief system. And so these POWs came back with an even renewed, deepened sense of faith and belief, profound. And so I started to dig into these practices. And it turns out these practices were extraordinary. And I offer them because I think that this is what leaders should try to do in the course of your days and nights and how you serve other human beings as leaders. The first is maintaining communications with everybody. When I teach leadership, I say to a leader, assume there's an invisible circle around you, right? And your job as a leader is to make sure everybody you lead feels that they psychologically belong in that circle. And one of the worst things you can do is create favorites. Because invariably when someone's a favorite, someone's not. So they worked, initially the North Vietnamese wouldn't even let them talk to each other. So they had to develop this intricate tapping code. They got rid of the letters K and Q. And they had to send messages tapping on the pipes. Well, think about the patience and determination that it took to send out a simple message. And the patient determination that it took to receive the message. And the only other writing utensil was a piece of broken tile. And they would write on this lousy toilet paper. But they just fought horrendously to make sure that everybody was in the circle. Right? The second was, this is insane, cultivating positivity. You're going to go like, how do you do that? Like the food sucks, the experience sucks, right? Like, how do you do that? Well, one of the most important people in these POW camps was the jester. When I went to Army Ranger School, they would always designate who was the best joke teller. And that would be the unit morale officer. And like when things really sucked, the rain and cold and hungry and tired, okay, morale support officer, get out here. You better do your magic right now. Right? So there was an order from senior leadership that said, every day that you're here, right, you're to work on you. Right? This is the most costly experience of your life. Make it count. Make it matter. That in itself is transformational. And so finding deeper meaning in the experience. My friend Lee says that when he came out a much better man than he went in. Most prisoners, that's not happening. I've done a lot of prison ministry, and they're not good places. And usually it's really hard to come out better. But these POWs did. The fourth was just tremendous focus on self-care. Some of these men talk about how they were probably the best physical shape of their lives. Lee tells he could do 100 push-ups on his hands. They would have these contests, squats, push-ups, sit-ups. They had to be able to walk 22 miles. Can you imagine, like, how monotonous and crazy that was? But they did it because they said, one day, if we get out of here and we get rescued, I don't know how they came up with 22 miles, but it probably sounded it's not like a marathon, but it's close. And this emphasis on relationship building and this scripture passage that says iron sharpens iron and worked a lot on themselves of being more patient, being more understanding. One of the practices that when one of their fellow POWs got tortured, you usually knew when it was happening because of the screams. And as that POW came back into the cell, there would be this outpouring of communication that says, you're loved. We've been there. We know what you've gone through. No shame. And then there was this craziness of letting go of negative attitudes towards your captors. And there's the notion that if you're still hanging on to that bitterness, that resentfulness, when we've been let go, you're still in captivity. And of course, as I said before, they had a deepened sense of belief. If you knew John McCain, he embodied these qualities. One of my disappointments in his campaign for president, he didn't talk about his POW experience. And the men that were in prison cells with him, they loved this man. He was a smartass. He was bottom of his class at the Naval Academy. Barely hung on. And his father and his grandfather were 4-star admirals. And the North Vietnamese said, hey, if you make a nice video saying you're getting decent treatment, we'll let you go early. And not only did he say no, he said, you can take your little offer and shove it where the sun doesn't shine. And got beat for that. And he got beat for a lot of other things. And he was another morale support officer by his relationship with the guards. So these were the amazing practices of these extraordinary men. And I share them with you because I think they're practices that we can integrate into our lives. And then 9/11, horrendous day for America. And once again, the behavioral scientists, the psychologists said massive trauma. All right, we're going to have so much post-traumatic stress disorder, especially in our young people, of those who are close to ground zero, those who are family members of victims, and even family members of survivors. Right, and yet 54 studies, this research just came out recently, 54 studies all confirmed that there wasn't all of this massive post-traumatic stress disorder. Certainly people have negative emotions, especially the closer you were to the World Trade Centers or the Pentagon. They're going to have some negative emotions, and very quickly you're going to see those negative emotions. But negative emotions do not equal, post-traumatic stress disorder. And believe it or not, that the majority of people 6 months later got back to normal. So there is this resilience quality of human beings. But there's a different, and I'm not making the case that post-traumatic growth is the opposite of post-traumatic stress disorder. Right? Matter of fact, I always say that for 100 men or women that go into combat, that we know that 12 to 15 are going to come back with some level of post-traumatic stress disorder. Most of it treatable, if diagnosed. But there's another 50 that come back with resilience and get back to this normal. But there's another portion that come back with like, that sucked, and I'm going to use it to transform my life. I'm going to use that to make me a better woman, a better man. I'm more determined, and like, I'm going for it now, after what I've experienced. And so I think for this it gives me tremendous hope and optimism. Ernest Hemingway, who probably didn't embody this well since he took his life at 64, said these magic words, like, we all get broken in life, but some of us grow stronger in the broken places. And it turns out that you and I can play a part in growing stronger in the broken places. Like I'm flying to Minneapolis tomorrow, where I'm going to be with a group of 30 people, and I have these post-traumatic growth circles. And after I present some of this research on post-traumatic growth, I then sort of talk about their experience. Like, what sucked for you over the last couple of years? Right? And what have you learned from it? How have you grown? And more importantly, how can this be a catalyst for future growth? So based on that, I share with you what I call the 7 self-care strategies for resilience and post-traumatic growth. I was telling Will that I even had a frame of a mindset change this morning about the order, but it was too late. I'd sent the slides. But the keystone habit, right, for all of this self-care is cultivating positive emotion. And why I like every fiber of my being says this is true, because what we know about the brain is 2 things that it is predicated on. The first is a negativity bias. Because if you have a negativity bias, guess what you spend your life focusing on? All the things that can harm you and hurt you. Right? It's a survival strategy. And when you're hunting for the bad, those who have been in combat, it's hard to hunt for the good at the same time, right? So this notion of, so that's the first thing, is overcoming the negativity bias. The second thing is your brain is also predicated on efficiency. It takes a lot of energy to make this thing work. And the prefrontal cortex is magnificent but easily overwhelmed. What looks like a motivation problem is often an exhaustion problem. I know as an infantry company commander, I woke up every day when we were not deployed, and I told myself, I got to make sure these men do some hard PT, because I know that when we go into combat, fatigue is going to make cowards of us all. And so if your mind is predicated on efficiency, right, it tends to hold on to whatever judgments, whatever perspectives, whatever insights. Because if I don't have to change my mind, it's a lot more efficient. And I don't know why that as politicians evolve and they get more enlightened, we treat them as pariah when they change their views. Like, shouldn't we, like, the more education we get, the more we learn, shouldn't we change our mind in a better way? Well, no, we call them flip-floppers. Like, there's something wrong with changing your mind. Right? So when I am in a state of positive being, I'm actually more creative. I'm actually more open. I'm actually more innovative. And people like hanging around me, the more positive I am too, right? And so how do we access more positive emotion? Simple exercise. Begin your day by saying, what 3 good things happened yesterday? What 3 good things happened yesterday? Hunt for the good. Well, I don't know if you got ever trained by the University of Pennsylvania created this program called resilience training. Do you remember that? No, didn't hit the 82nd. Hunt the good stuff. There you go, Austin. Thank you. So, you know, one of the ways we hunt the good stuff is to catalog. Don't keep track of the bad things. Keep track of the good things. And then if you don't want to do that, you know, we have these smartphones that have thousands of photos. I have a little picture frame called Nix Play, N-I-X, that sits on my desk. And all my kids are loading pictures in there all the time. And so every time I walk into my office and look there, I'm getting images that bring me joy, that invite a memory, a positive memory, right? And this picture of me just gives me such joy to even share it with you. Like, because this little one in my lap, her name is Lucy, and that's Lucy's sister Estelle, and Lucy's a miracle baby. Because my oldest daughter had cancer and ovaries had to be removed. And she tried to get pregnant through IVF and it didn't take. So my beautiful daughter outside stepped up to be the egg donor. And so Lucy's a team sport. So whenever I see that picture, it just brings me joy. And oh, by the way, my daughter Katie, who's out there, her 4-year-old son is Rowan. He's got bright red hair. And little Lucy, she's got bright red hair. So when you see them together, you'll go, oh, they're brother and sister. No, they're just on the same team. And MIT got into this business of looking at positive emotion, in particular in relationships. And in the best marriages, the best teams, the best partnerships, they actually have charted, you know, measured that they have 5.6 positive interactions for every negative. Right? It's called the Landa ratio. And if you want to destroy a marriage, you want to destroy a relationship, turn it around. Right? In the worst teams, the ratio is 0.363 to 1. 3 negatives for every positive. Right? Just destroys people's spirit. And a beautiful book, even the Harvard Business School got into this with a big smiley face on their edition. And it was called The Happiness Advantage by Sean Anker. It's the 2nd highest rated TED Talk, and it's a beautiful story. But what he digs into is that when you are put in a positive mood and you are happy, you are much more brilliant. Doctors put in a happy mood, make their diagnosis 3 times faster and 19% more accurate. Right? Salesmen are better salesmen. Software engineers are better software engineers. Like in every endeavor, right? People perform better when they're put in a more positive mood. And groundbreaking research says we've got it all wrong, that as I shared with you my recovering story, right? I believe that I got to be happy when everything in my life was working well, when I was enough. Well, that's just a flawed mental model, right? I have flip-flopped, and I believe positive emotion and happiness is the precursor to success, not just the outcome. Right? I love this couple. They're from Uzbekistan, and they've been married 50 years, and I just, delightful. And then another book called The Happiness Project, Gretchen Rudin, and she came up with the second splendid truth called one of the best ways to make yourself happy is to make other people happy. And one of the best ways to make other people happy is to be happy yourself. And my dear friend John Biagio said, if you're happy, notify your face. Right? And laughter really is one of the greatest medicines. I hope no one's from Mississippi. But Mississippi's literacy program shows improvement, but not enough. As I said, I do a lot of work in healthcare, and miracle cure kills fifth patient. It is a miracle, but the wrong kind. And hospitals resort to hiring doctors. Can you believe that? That's crazy. And then this one I love from a place in Vancouver, British Columbia, Wreck Beach. Nudists fight erection at towers near Wreck Beach. And it's a very creative journalist. I love to talk about joy because I define joy as happiness on steroids. And I was giving this talk some years ago to a bunch of pediatricians at Wellstar. And the chief pediatric officer came running up to me and said, Greg, you got to read this book, The Book of Joy. And it's a week-long conversation between the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who sadly passed away earlier this year, both of them Nobel Peace Prizes. But they make a case for accessing joy. And it's defined as exuberance, glee, bliss, elation. And I don't know about you, but I want more of that, especially and oh, by the way, the newspapers, they are not trying to present you lots of joy. They want to keep you scared and frightened, so you keep coming back for more. And so I borrowed from Gretchen Rubin's the second splendid truth of happiness, and I said one of the best ways to make yourself joyful is to make other people joyful, and one of the best ways to make other people joyful is be joyful yourself, and it's infectious and it's contagious. So share the joy. And the Dalai Lama said it so well in that book. He said that from the very core of our being, we simply desire joy and contentment, and the ultimate source of happiness is within us. This is what my counselor, Kempton Haynes, was trying to make the case for. And I just know we create most of our suffering, and it should be logical. We also have the ability to create more joy in our lives. And this is the magic. It simply depends upon the attitudes, the perspectives, and the reactions we bring to situations and to our relationships with other people. Right? Many human beings don't believe they have a choice, but we do. And so that's the first habit, cultivate positive emotion. The second habit, which builds upon that, is reflecting and expressing gratitude and appreciation. And of all the practices that have made my life different and more profound, this is the one. Because whether I start my day or end my day, I have a little app called Gratitude. Man, I'm almost out of time. Can you believe that? Wow. Turn off the alarm so it didn't... Anyway, it's called Gratitude, and it's an amazing app, and I've got 294 straight days of making at least 3 journal entries. So I'm going to fly by these. I thank you, Harrison, but yours is a thankless job. Don't be that person. Right? And one of the ways that I have found to be in a deep place of gratitude is to take this perspective. Right? And I captured this picture like 8 years ago in the U.S. News World Report, or U.S. News. Isn't that the newspaper? USA Today, thank you. It was there, thank you. And these 2 little girls were in this village in northern Nigeria, and Boko Haram came in, took away their mothers, killed the fathers. And when I think of that picture, my heart just goes out to these 2 little girls having 3 daughters and two grandchildren who are daughters. And my hope when I see this picture is, one, take perspective that your life is pretty blessed. Your problems are, in comparison to theirs, are insignificant. 2, they deserve to be happy. So God, I've had all my needs met. Like, do what you can for these 2 little girls. They deserve it. And that's my daughter who had cancer on March 29, 2019. Amazing surgery at Emory, saved her life. And 6 weeks later, she graduated from nursing school. And just when I think about that, I'm grateful. I'm grateful. Free human fuel, we need to infect as many people as this. I call it ARE, appreciation, recognition, encouragement. The third habit, deepening our social bonds. It is probably the greatest predictor of the most meaningful, productive life you could ever have. There have been the longest study of adult development began in 1938 with 728 young men at Harvard, and they've continued to study even the grandchildren of these men. And it turns out that the one factor that, wasn't fame, wasn't fortune, wasn't title, wasn't degrees. It was the capacity to build deep, intimate relationships. So I challenge you to have relationships, and that acronym of H is about humility, to make it about them. A, acceptance, when people feel seen, magic happens. V, to be vulnerable, to allow people to also be vulnerable and open up. And E, to have as much empathy as you can. These are a gathering of my must friends. And I make a distinction between must friends and rust friends and just friends. And I challenge you, are there a couple just friends that you could move into the trust friends category? And are there some trust friends that you can move into the must? And the must friends are the ones that at 2 a.m. will drop everything to help you. And it turns out there's all of these studies on loneliness and how loneliness kills. Men live on average 8 to 12 years less than women. And a lot of the research that is emerging is because of relationships and loneliness. And when a man's spouse dies, he does live shorter. And when a woman's spouse dies, she lives longer. What's with that, women? Well, you know the answer. You know the answer. So the powerful collective belonging community, a lot of our veterans know that deeply and intimately. We take care of our own. Habit number 4, living with a deeper sense of purpose and meaning, understanding your big why. NCR's purpose, we turn everyday transactions into meaningful relationships, just amazing. And so you have a clear compass. I love to talk about this statue. Power of meaning in our lives. This statue's not finished. It sits in Milan all by itself, but it's famous because it's the last thing that Michelangelo ever carved in the year 1564. And Michelangelo was the age of 88. And if you Google the source of all truth, you'll find that the average Italian male died at about 30. So this man almost lived 3 times as long because I think he woke up every day with a burning passion to do something meaningful and purposeful. I love this letter. This comes from a Navy SEAL by the name of Jason Redman, who by 2012 had probably 34 surgeries. He took a 7.62 round through his face. Only through the miracles of combat medical care was he able to get to Naval Bethesda Hospital 2 days later. But he's gone through horrendous surgeries and recovery. But he said, and I love these words, to all who enter here, if you are coming here with sorrow or to feel sorry for my wounds, go elsewhere. These wounds I received, I got in a job I love, doing it for people I love, supporting the freedom of a country I deeply love. Well, I don't know if you can see that. I don't want to read it to you, but I love the ending. It says that I will push that about 20% further through sheer mental tenacity. This room you are about to enter is a room of fun, optimism, and intense rapid growth. If you are not prepared for that, go elsewhere, sign the management. If I have no other message today, it's the Dalai Lama message that we create our suffering, then it's only natural that we also can create our happiness. And the second message is you are responsible. You are the management of you. Habit number 5 is promoting hope and optimism. Turns out that optimists outlive pessimists by on average of 3 years. So there's something to longevity. And my challenge to you is not just living long, but living well. Would make the case for optimism, but I don't have time. And Edmund Friedman, a wonderful rabbi who's passed away, said that the capacity of leaders to separate themselves from the surrounding emotional climate may be central to our evolution as a human being. And so You can't give what you don't have says you've got to be focusing on making sure that you are well and happy and joyful and connected. The sixth habit is being mindful, and it's not just about meditation. It's about finding pockets of stillness in busy lives that we lead. And it turns out that by spending time in contemplation and spending time in deep breathing and spending time not thinking about work and not thinking about all the pressures and anxieties we're sharing, and just to be still is incredibly helpful. And just like I said, positive emotion is life-giving, so is mindfulness. And I couldn't have a talk about taking care of yourself if I didn't talk about not resilience, but moving our bodies each and every day, right? If you look at the places where people live well beyond 100, the blue zones, they are finding they're not doing CrossFit. CrossFit's wonderful. Running marathons is wonderful, but what they're doing is staying active, getting up, moving. The women on Okinawa have the longest life expectancy in the world, and one of the reasons being is all of their furniture's on the floor, and a Japanese woman in Okinawa will get up probably 70 times up and down, consistently putting force on her legs and her arm muscles. And they have gardens, and you know the benefits of moving. So my challenge to you with this slide right here, somewhere, no, not that one, sorry, is I challenge you as you think about the 7 habits, right? Cultivating positive emotion. 2, reflecting and going into an exercise daily around your gratefulness and appreciation. 3, deepening your social bonds and connections with others. 4, being clear on your purpose and meaning in your life. 5, cultivating hope and optimism and hopefulness. 6, sort of taking care of your mind so that it can function at its very best for you and the service and the work you do. And 7th, keep moving. So my message to you is there one thing that you could do to make your life even more magnificent because you are the author of your life, and write the best story you can. That's it. Questions? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Austin. Any questions? Yes, John.
Can I grab a microphone?
Greg, I've read and heard about PTSD and a particular focus on the D, that it's a disorder, when in fact it's normal. And so there's been some discussion around just dropping the D altogether, because you're kind of conveying to people that what they're going through is a disorder, when in fact it's very natural.
Yeah.
Just love for you to speak to
No,
that.
I think, John, you make an incredible point, and the brain is this magnificent, has capacity to create our reality. And so even language, when as young kids, we often tell our kids sticks and stones can break our bones, but words can never hurt. Words affect us and hurt us in amazing ways. So the research I've read actually confirms what you said as well. That it's, I hope the convention begins to sort of call it post-traumatic stress versus disorder. So thank you. Anything else? Well, again, I challenge you to write the best possible story that you can. It's well within you. Everything I shared with you is doable, achievable, and it's about you making the right choices for you. So it's been a privilege to share some of my journey with you. I thank you for your attention, and I wish NCR and all of your careers nothing but the greatest success in your lives. Thank you.